Hello and welcome to The Digital Insight, the technology, procurement and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those who are leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to The Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. In today's episode, I sit down for part 1 of 2 with Michael Cadieux, a procurement industry fanatic obsessed with making procurement cool and the founder of Procurement Foundry. Together, we pick apart exactly why procurement needs to be made cool and how Michael plans to achieve that. Michael also tells us why the Procurement Foundry is the world's premier sourcing industry community.
Hey, Dale, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here today.
No, absolutely. The pleasure is mine. So as a way of introducing yourself then to our listeners, so obviously they can read as to who you are, but why don't you just give us a bit of an idea as to who you are in terms of your career journey, your experience, and basically what you know and what you do in procurement.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to give a little bit of background. My name is Mike Cadieux. I've been in procurement and sourcing for, about 30 years. The first 12, 13 years of my career, I was actually in the seafood industry, and I was sourcing live commodity goods in the seafood industry. And then I came to corporate America about 20 years ago, I guess. And I started off in IT and managed some IT departments and assets for some financial institutions. Then I moved into advertising and marketing and went to work for a company called Digitas out of Boston, and took over their sourcing and management and business operations for their IT organization. A little bit later down the road, Digitas got acquired by Publicis Group, and I went to work inside of the Publicis Group procurement organization. I was actually hired in from the acquisition to build out and manage the North American procurement organization for all indirect spend for Publicis Group's holdings. That expanded later on to South America and Canada. And by the time it was all done, I had a team of about 20 managing, somewhere in the area of about $2 billion worth of spend under management, including the production spend. So that's a little bit about my background. I live in Massachusetts in the United States, and I have a couple of kids and my wife and family here, and love sailing in the off season. Have a sailboat, and I'm an avid sailor. So that's about everything about me that I can think of.
Oh, fantastic. And it's clear then you have some incredible experience, and I speak to a number of people, particularly obviously in the procurement industry and procurement space. And one of the key topics that we talk about a lot is just how much there's been a huge shift in terms of not just what procurement is, but what people think about procurement from an organizational perspective. I guess then over the course of your career and over the course of that journey, you've managed to see this firsthand. Can you go into a little bit of detail about, if you could speak to yourself, back when you were a little bit younger, back when you were starting out in your first role within the sort of sourcing area, what would you say have been some of the biggest and most dramatic changes?
Wow, great question. And there certainly have been a lot of changes, both from just a shift from the actual act of procurement and doing a lot of transactional processing type activities and what I'll call just rudimentary paper pushing. Always adding value, but really just doing a lot of vendor sourcing and buying and purchasing. To now, really, I see it as a strategic sourcing partnership at the back of the house, where you're part of the team that's driving operational efficiency, EBITDA, improved margins for companies. Lots of procurement and sourcing people now working on merger and acquisition strategies and synergy saving models. So it's really a much more dynamic role than it was years ago, certainly. And then, so you've had to try to keep up with that. And then in addition to that, just the massive tsunami of technology and digitalization, I guess, of procurement as a whole. And it sounds a lot like I'm using a lot of buzzwords, but it really is true. I mean, we did a lot of this stuff on Excel and Word POs back then. They weren't procure to pay systems per se. And they were, we'd cut purchase orders out of our ERP systems back then, and now we've got full blown integrated. I don't want to call them AI enabled, but certainly machine learning enabled uh, procure to pay workflow systems that are cloud based, have punch outs and benchmarking. I mean, it's just amazing what's available today from a technology perspective, which I think has enabled the expansion and in the growth of the job to what it is today, which is really enabling the strategy side of it to take hold.
And looking at it from a senior management perspective, then obviously you've lived and breathed procurement, sourcing, the supply chain. You understand that because it's what you've been doing for such a long time. It's in your blood, to use a bit of an idiom there. But what about in terms of how it's shifted in from what the senior managers think and executive teams who perhaps once upon a time didn't really know much about procurement now suddenly find themselves sitting at at the same table as procurement. How has those conversations changed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it used to be something that a long time ago they all used to do on their own and considered to be part of their job description. Didn't really see it as a true niche specialty, and now it has truly become a specialty and a leaned on partner in the space. You see stakeholders that are bringing in strategic sourcing at the inception point of new activities, be it new technology needs or new process improvements. Uh, I see strategic sourcing being brought in on budgeting and sessions, annual budgeting and forecasting sessions now, so that people can know what sourcing can do to optimize their cost basis and their budget. So we're almost financial advisors as well. It's truly amazing to go from somebody down the hall who just cuts the POs to, hey, I need your help strategically aligning my business plan for my P&L this year, and what can you do to enable me to hit my own targets and benefits.
Yeah, and do you think then? So, on one hand, this is it's fantastic news for someone like yourself or for anybody who's involved in sourcing, because now I don't want to use this term that they have more sway, but obviously they have more influence and they're more engaged and more involved. That obviously creates more opportunity, but at the same time, does that also create more pressure? Perhaps more pressure than what was there previously. So when they were probably perhaps seen as just a cost center, or people were working in isolation, the pressures were their own pressures, but they knew how to deal with them. But now, because they're much higher up, they're driven from the top. Is that pressure greatened because of that?
Sure, absolutely, right. With any expansion of responsibilities and being part of a larger team that's delivering, and being seen as a true piece of the equation in any enterprise class program now, where you have real deliverables as part of the team on either cost saving initiatives or opportunities for transformation, introduction, vendor innovation, continuous improvement models against services. You're being asked to make some really hefty recommendations on things, like potentially outsourcing some of the operations to third party vendors and best cost country geographies and things like that. So yeah, certainly the pressure is higher, absolutely, and the skill set is starting to change as well because of that. So you need a lot more EQ skills, a lot more qualitative skills. Your communication skills are completely different than they used to be. You're really more of a a marketing or politician now in a lot of cases than you are, um, I don't know, more of a finance operation that you used to be. Certainly a lot more goes into your positioning in the room when you're surrounded by the rest of the C-level executives. You're no longer that redheaded stepchild that you used to be, a lot of times the majority of the folks in the room are looking at you to drive new innovative thought processes around significant business goals and objectives.
I spoke recently with a senior analyst who just released a report looking at sort of the procurement landscape in 2020, and they sort of identified some of the top priorities and the key changes. And one thing he spoke of was how, while essentially there was a balancing act needed in this sort of new look, not new look, but this kind of modern day procurement, that once upon a time, yes, it was just find stuff at cheaper cost, or find stuff or reduce costs. Now it's a combination of reduce costs but also add value. And he talked a lot about people struggling actually to strike that balance, because ultimately things can happen where you not necessarily have to let go of one side of that, but that cost reduction, that saving money is always going to be the higher priority. Is this something you've seen? Have you seen people having lofty goals of being like, of course we want to find value, but falling back on, well, actually we still need to reduce costs where possible, and sort of foregoing that value creation model?
Yeah, I think that certainly, listen, you're in sourcing, you're in procurement, you're in supply chain management. There's always going to be a need and a requirement for folks to be have good fiduciary responsibilities and try and drive the costs out of the models wherever possible. But I was literally in a meeting yesterday talking about advertising and marketing spend, and talking about the fact that a lot of the category managers in the advertising marketing spend, which is a huge line item, right behind facilities and headcount, in a lot of cases, that they've probably gone a little bit too far in the negotiation process and started to drive in some issues because they're driving costs so hard, and they've gotten some of their advertising and marketing partners on the other side of the table into a position where their margins are so low now that they're having trouble with retention of staff, which is then causing quality issues to the chief marketing officer's office, right? So I think that there's certainly a responsibility to always drive cost savings, but I think there's a much more intelligent view on that nowadays than potentially in the past, where it was just grinding down vendors. That really has taken its toll on some of the relationships and some of the services that get offered to the enterprise, and then ultimately just comes back in another form of a problem somewhere else down the road. I think that holistically, from an industry perspective, and I won't speak. I think that the indirect procurement side, which is where my career has always been, is taking a page out of the book of the supply chain management teams of the world, where we now are in the indirect side of the house, starting to weigh risk more than cost as a primary driver in any sourcing event that we do, especially with the digitalization of the enterprise. I mean, just about everything that comes across sourcing's desk these days has some technology element to it. Most of those technology elements are somewhere in the cloud, and the risk associated with cloud storage and management and solutions certainly in a lot of cases outweighs the cost basis, right? A lot of companies that are technology-based companies, or solutions that are offering solutions on technology platforms, their risk is enormous associated with simple things like uptime and connectivity to their centralized repository that fuels their primary products. So while I think cost is a really big factor, I think risk mitigation strategies that have come out of the supply chain management space are now making headway into indirect procurement. And I see risk as the primary number one focus group of indirect procurement right now. I think that'll shift back when we get into a little bit of an economic turn here, at least on this side of the pond. But I think that because always when there's an economic downturn, everybody starts to go back to the old faithful, hey, let's cut costs. But I think right now risk is certainly the leader in what's happening.
So let's look back at yourself then, and I'm going to just call on your LinkedIn page, because I think this links quite nicely to, you mentioned in your sort of little title that you're obsessed with making procurement cool.
Yeah.
And I want to know, and I want to explore that a little bit in terms of, well, quite frankly, why does procurement need to be made cool, and why isn't it already cool?
I think that, and thanks for calling that out. That's great. Listen, I think anything worth doing is worth doing and having fun doing it, and that's kind of my take on it is, I think people who enjoy their jobs and think of themselves as, the procurement and sourcing demigods down the hall, who are having fun and breaking new ground every day, have a lot more fun and enjoy what they do. Let's face facts. Um, Sourcing, it has a lot of conflict in it, right? I mean, every day you have a conflict of some type that you're trying to resolve, whether it's a new vendor and conflict can cause stress, and it can get a little bit mundane from time to time. I met a gentleman a year ago who's been buying spray enamels for a very large manufacturer for the last 30 years. And I thought to myself, boy, if I had to buy spray paint for 30 years, I think I'd be a little bit bored, right? But I mean, if you can figure out some way to make it cool, inject some life into it, maybe take new lens at it every once in a while. I used to run a program where we did our weekly reviews, and every once in a while, I'd bring somebody from completely outside of the industry in. I've got some friends that own auto dealerships and things like that. I'd have an auto dealership owner come in and sit in my meetings to give us a fresh perspective and just talk, different verbiage, different person, different set of eyes. Just make it exciting and interesting. I mean, if it's worth doing, it's worth having fun at.
That's quite interesting. That and what was the sort of, not necessarily the response to that, but let's just say you're in those meetings and you could have had those meetings once a month, every month for the last 5 years, bringing in that fresh perspective. What was the sort of immediate impact of that? Even something as simple as the way people speak about, sourcing or spending or whatever. Did that change almost immediately?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. At first, people are like, "Hey, who's that person in the room?" or "Who's a new set of eyes?" or "Geez, this is a crazy new approach." But once some creative juices get flowing in a room, and you start enjoying what you're doing, listen, procurement, sourcing, supply chain management, in my opinion, is an art form, right? I mean, so much so that our friend Phil Edelson, he named his outfit "Art of Procurement," right? So, and I think that, in my opinion, I think that a very well written contract is a piece of work, is a piece of artwork, and I don't see why you shouldn't revel in that. I think that there's a lot of artistry in what we do. I think that everybody thinks that it's just head down grinding accountant, procurement, finance type work in the background and legal work and jargon. But I see it really as an art form, and good negotiations is definitely an art form, no question about it. So I think that when you start to inject some other folks into it, be it completely remove third-party outsources, like I mentioned in my example, or just bring in other peers from other departments. Bring in the treasury team, bring in the finance team, bring in a couple of folks from marketing and advertising, and let them just sit in your meetings from time to time and listen. Send your people in your programs out to their meetings to get new ideas on how they run their meetings and how they approach problems and what are they using for collaboration tools. I mean, that's the real crux of where innovation's happening.
And you used a key word there. You mentioned collaboration, and I think that leads us quite nicely into your role with the Procurement Foundry, which, well, I'll let you explain. But from what I know, it's a huge community. It's a sourcing and procurement community aimed at creating greater collaboration and ideas exchange. Tell us a bit more then about what is the Procurement Foundry.
Yeah, thank you for that. The Procurement Foundry is really an interesting phenomenon. When I left my role at Publicis Group a couple of years ago and started my own consulting firm, I was really looking for a way to collaborate with some peers, and I started off with a really small online private group inside of LinkedIn, and it was kind of non-published, and I just wanted some people that I could talk to, because when you rise up into the senior levels of procurement, your negotiation chops get a little bit rusty. And in opening up your own business, I had a calling to be back in the fields negotiating, real deals. And so I needed some collaboration. I built a small little group for some of my peers and I to be able to chat and have discussions about, different topics associated with terms and conditions and things like that, and what they were seeing in the marketplace. And that went from 25 friends and colleagues to a bunch of invitations out to other people, all private, all practitioners, and we ended up with like 1,100 people in this group in like 5 months. And then I realized, geez, we're building a community here, and we probably need to be on another platform, something that's certainly searchable. And it seems to be a really big need, going from 25 people to 1,100 people in 4 months. So last year, in June of 2019, we founded and launched Procurement Foundry, which is one of the fastest growing online private communities now for supply chain management and procurement, indirect sourcing people. It is like I said, it's a private community. So you request membership to get in. It's fully vetted and manually vetted by our staff to make sure that you are actually a practitioner. We don't let any sales or consulting folks into the community. We want to make sure that our people feel comfortable collaborating and sharing inside of our community. And it's really built for the practitioners. So unlike a lot of other communities or other types of resources that are available that come through your current employer, this is really, in my mind, built for the practitioners themselves. So you'll see job boards in there, you'll see candidate boards in there, you'll see different topics and discussions, education, a lot of people sharing templates on RFP, RFI type stuff. A lot of this is the part that is really amazing to me. We've actually now got over 20 regional chapters, all run by volunteers across the world, and more coming every week. And they're holding monthly, quarterly meetings at these regional chapters led by volunteers with no vendor sponsorship at all. And they're getting 30, 40, 50 people there on their own dime just to network in these micro networking events, without all of the process and sales activity that a lot of others are taking. So the Procurement Foundry is growing very, very quickly. We're very excited about it. We're going to be introducing a lot of content in the next year, and it's the feedback has been simply amazing from the community so far on the value that they're getting and bringing back to their companies, and also the value that they're getting independent of that, to the point where we're just about to release a salary and compensation survey that we just completed that'll tell lots of information about how people are compensated, and we're gonna put that out there probably in the next week or so. So really amazing phenomenon that I didn't think would get as big as it has so fast, and I'm just shocked by how it's grown.
It sounds fantastic. And I was going to ask the simple question as why? Why is it important for these practitioners to come together and be able to talk and share and acknowledge each other, and, like you say, templates, and then because one thing I always like to ask people when I speak to them is that obviously they are, when they're professionals who work as part of their own companies, but then they're coming on their own behalf to just engage with other fellow professionals. Why is that so important to do that, to step away from the sort of comfort zone, as it were, of the boundaries of your own business, and to talk to people in similar positions and just that sort of knowledge exchange? Why is that so necessary?
Well, I think at procurement and sourcing's core, it's all about knowledge, right? You don't go into a contract negotiation or a sourcing event without knowledge. I mean, think about your own personal life. You don't go buy an automobile or anything for that matter without taking a look at what's in the marketplace and who you should be talking to, and what the specifics are about what you're trying to buy. And what the stakeholders' goals and objectives are. I mean, my wife just told me the other day that we needed a new refrigerator for the house. I sat with her for an hour and got the stakeholder objectives and goals from her on what she wanted and needed. Then I went out and researched in the marketplace. And I think that, communities like Procurement Foundry are offering people an opportunity to go in and network, collaborate, get information, share information about, who to invite to their RFIs and RFPs, where they've had good experiences and bad. And also, they're talking to each other about, hey, I'm a category manager in X, Y, and Z category space. What are we doing to keep up with knowledge in that space and stay on top of our game? And there's a very good community of people out there in supply chain management and procurement. The sharing and the networking and the collaboration that people are willing to do, if you can find a place to ask them, is unbelievable. What people are willing to offer other folks to help out to better their careers without asking for anything in return. It really, truly is amazing.
I suppose the obvious answer would be to just go online and find it, but that's too easy. I don't want to just say, where can we find out about the Procurement Foundry? Say I'm a procurement professional and I'm looking to engage, and I'm looking to sort of do exactly what you've just described, but I don't know about the Procurement Foundry. Where would I even begin to look to get on board, to find out information, and to become a part of it if it's something that I want to do?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So we have a full website at procurementfoundry.com. It gets out lots of information. We have a blog that's attached to that we post stuff out to every week. We do a lot of content development and articles. We even do guest blogs now with a lot of the Procurement Foundry members who are looking to put out content that they think is important on topics that they're following. And you can do that through, like I said, procurementfoundry.com. There's a membership sign up form there that you can fill out. We'll review your membership request. And like I said, if you qualify and you're a practitioner in a corporate setting, we're going to get back to you in a day or two, invite you into we have a Slack-based community. So that's what we use as our platform, as our backbone for our platform. And right now we're closing in on about 2,300 members. So the other places that they can find us, we're on Twitter at Procure Foundry. You can find us on LinkedIn. We have an entire page on LinkedIn. If you look up the Procurement Foundry on LinkedIn, you can definitely find us there. We put out a ton of content on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is also where we have our meetup events. So we post our meetup events on LinkedIn. We also have a Facebook page. Just look up Procurement Foundry in Facebook and you'll find it. And that'll lead you to all back to the procurementfoundry.com, where you can become a member. And then once you're in, you can join any one of the 67 collaboration channels that we have on whatever topic, region, or spend category you're involved with.
Oh, fantastic. And I suppose my final question then is, and this might be a bit of a challenge, but it'd be an interesting one, is say everyone knows all of that, and we've covered exactly why, and it's clear why someone should want to get involved. But if you had maybe 2 or 3 sentences to really convince someone why they should get involved with Digital Foundry, how would you sell it?
Geez, if I had 2 sentences to get somebody involved with Procurement Foundry, I would say if you're looking for a place to collaborate on your time when you can, at the pace that you can collaborate at, and find peers that understand what you do and can attempt to help you. And and it's free, and it's really built for the practitioner to help advance your career, then Procurement Foundry is a place where you should probably come.
Join me next time as Michael returns to discuss how, as technology continues to transform and take over the procurement function, the human element becomes more important than ever before.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with the Interface.net and CPOstrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/The Digital Insight.